Welcome back to another conversation on Healing Horizon. I'm your host Pragya, and today we step into a space of depth, truth, and the kind of reflective honesty our world desperately needs right now. In a time when burnout feels normal, emotions are rushed through, and intuition gets buried under noise, Nikki Allen stands as a reminder that healing is not a trend, it's a homecoming. Her voice invites us to notice the invisible parts of our lives, the way our bodies hold memory, the way our intuition whispers beneath the chaos, and the way alignment asks us to be brave, even when the world pulls up us in opposing directions. So today's conversation is not just a discussion, it's an invitation to pause, to listen, and to meet your healing with a softer, wiser gaze. And with that, I welcome Nikki on the show and thank you so much for being here. And it's an honor to host you today.
Thank you for having me on to be here.
That's great. So to start with, lately everywhere we look, like social media, wellness spaces, even everyday conversations, healing is presented like a timeline or a transformation challenge. And people expect clarity without chaos in their lives, right? And growth without grief. So, from that global tension between expectation and reality, I want to know that when people they first step onto their healing path, what do you find they misunderstand the most about the nature of this journey? Because I'm sure, how it looks out there on social media. It's totally different when it's practiced, when it is a whole process.
Absolutely. And, the first thing I always tell people is to give themselves some grace because healing is not just one step. You don't take a pill and you're fixed. You don't do one exercise, you're fixed. You don't do one meditation and you're fixed. It's really part of the journey um, to becoming whomever it is you're to become. So give yourself some grace. That's always step number one. Stay off of social media telling you how far along you should be because everybody's journey is different. And I'm a firm believer of slow and steady wins the race. So take your time, give yourself some grace, and then start unpacking the things that you believe need to be unpacked so that you can transform and heal.
Mm. That's great. That's great. Thank you for that. Also, to add on to that, when those illusions they begin to fall apart, right? We all have illusions. So how do you gently help them reframe their progress without feeling like they're failing at healing and they've not done anything about their process? So what is your way of helping people out with this?
With the illusions, the brain is very teachable. So you could teach it to whatever you want it to teach it. Whatever you focus on is what you become. That saying, you are what you eat. So the main thing is you really just have to come from a place of self-love because when you come from a place of self-love, which is going to be part of your journey, but when you get to that place, you don't really care about outside noises because you're so focused on you, and at some point on this self-love journey, you'll be so in love with yourself that you really don't care what outside influences are. So that knocks down any illusions of what everyone thinks you should be and what they've made you feel like you should be at a certain time. So, step one, self-love, work on that. And when you're gonna have to cut out the noise when you start to work on self because self is about you, right? So hearing anybody else's opinions and thoughts, no more. What do you want? That is a question I ask myself often and daily when things come to me. Nikki, what do you want? And that's I come from that place of honesty. It's what I want. Don't worry about being selfish or self-centered. You're on a healing journey. Do what makes you feel better to get to you.
I love that. I love that. And that is what realism is, right? Thinking
Mhm.
about ourselves. And We often misconceive this as being selfish, but keeping yourself first, prioritizing yourself,
Oh,
not at all selfish, right? Also,
correct. Just think about it. When you're on an airplane, before you take off, the flight attendants come on and they tell you, should we have an emergency and the airbags deploy, who do they tell you to help first? Yourself. Because if you can't help yourself, you can't help anybody else.
that's absolutely true. And I totally agree to it because, again, you helping yourself would give you a clear idea that, okay, now I am in the space of helping others. And that is what makes it the best thing, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Also, we live in a world that worships logic and productivity to its highest, right? To the point where intuition, it often feels like a forgotten language, you know. Logic is the prerequisite of everything that we're taking or any step that we're taking. Yet, so many people, they're quietly longing to reconnect with the inner compass, right? With their guts, with their intuitions that, yeah, what is this? How is it happening? So, how do you define intuition in a society that measures worth through efficiency rather than inner truth and which often overlooks intuition? So, how do you explain it?
So for me, again, I've done my self-love work, so now I care not about what anybody else thinks. And I realize that the most successful moments that I've had in my life have been when I followed what my mom used to call my first mind, which is your intuition, that thing that says, I something told me I should have. I knew I should that when you start going through that. So I've learned to reconnect with that because I was taught with that. My mom used to tell me, follow your first mind. If that whatever pops up first, that's usually what it is. So it was just for me reconnecting with that and remembering that when I was operating at that level on that frequency, oh, I was amazing. I was manifesting. I didn't even understand what I was doing. Then life hit and then I had to go back and self-love and all that wonderful stuff. But I realized that my intuition is golden. That is it's a gift from God because it's from God. It's your angels, that's what I believe, leading, guiding, and directing you.
That is so, so true. And thank you for your story with that because that actually hits it. And thank you for that. Also, we see all around us, people are confronting emotional shadows, you know, collective grief, personal wounds, generational patterns, and all of that. And shadows, they're rising everywhere, asking to be acknowledged and, you know, asking to be seen or known. So, what do you believe our emotional shadows are trying to teach us, especially during times when the world itself it feels overwhelmed? So, how are these shadows helping us?
Shadows, mirrors, all the same to me. I think that, it I like to call them mirrors. And it's hard when we look at ourselves, right? But self is where the truth lies. So I think, you know, again, I know I keep saying this, but it's a self love thing. I don't think you can move forward and be healed and be transformed and block out illusions and deal with mirrors until you really heal yourself. It's that self-love because if you're not at in a place where you're really fully loving yourself and that shadow or that mirror pops up, you're going to run and hide. And then if you have all the social media, all the pressures from the world, from your life, from all of that, you cave in, you give up, and you just keep walking like a zombie, So self-love for real is the key to getting your whole transformation journey started. It's messy, it's ugly, it's hurtful, it's painful. It really is all those things. But I like to equate it to someone making a quilt. If you've ever seen a quilt on the backside, all that yarn and thread, it just looks like a big mess, a big pile of nothing. But when you turn it over, you have such a beautiful masterpiece. And that is what you're building. The underside doesn't look good, doesn't feel good, but you are becoming your own masterpiece. So, but to get there is that self-love. To get there, when you start loving yourself, you can then see that shadow or that mirror and hear that intuition that we just talked about saying, this is what it is or this is what it isn't, and you can make a move from there. But really, the base of all of this is self-love. You can buy all the products, all the things, all the watches, all the jewelry, go to all the churches, synagogues, wherever you worship, if you worship. But if you don't start with self love, loving yourself as is, you get nowhere. You're stagnant.
That is so, so true. I totally get that. And it all comes down to self love, right?
Mhm,
That is the basic thing that we ignore, and that is what helps us. So thank you for that
mhm.
again.
Yeah.
Also, we're watching people outgrow old relationships, right?
Mhm,
When it comes to relationships, identities, and spaces, we're all outgrowing it. And there is a global sense of shedding happening, right? And with that comes guilt for changing, guilt for choosing ourselves. And as you earlier also mentioned, that we totally forget that self love is not being selfish. But still, all we do is take guilt for that. So, how do you guide someone through spiritual or emotional evolution without letting guilt anchor them? And if you've anyway shared insights with us, right, that start with small circle, but still a lot of people, we just are very resistant towards it because the guilt, it takes over everything. So how do you guide them from the initial steps?
Again, it's like I said earlier, I ask myself, what do I want to do? And then I'm okay with being honest with myself saying, this is what I want to do. I'm not going to let anybody guilt me or shame me into believing or thinking or whatever it is. This is my belief. But again, we got to go back to that self-love, right? Because if you don't believe in yourself and have that conviction that it's okay to want what you want and believe what you believe, um, you're gonna be stuck with that guilt. You really it's so I call it soul surgery. I'm actually writing a book about it because we really have to do deep dives. Everything that you're asking me, they're great, amazing questions, but I can give you all the answers and tell you all the things that you should do, but it's not gonna work if we don't start from the root, which is that self-love, right? So I know he probably tired of me going back to that, but that is the root, right? Nobody can make you feel guilty about something you shouldn't feel guilty about if you're okay with you, right? Or if you're okay with whatever decisions you've made. You've said, hey, this is what it is. And someone's like, that's not right. And they try to make you feel guilty. Our natural response is, "Oh my god, maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I'm not in that phase anymore because I'm okay with what I said or did or whatever the situation may be because I've asked myself, what does Nikki want? After that question, there are other questions. What do I want? Is this going to work out? Is this safe? Is this all those wonderful backup questions? But once you get to, yes, this is what Nikki wants or whatever it is you want, no one can make me feel guilty about that. I don't walk around with guilt. And if I do something that makes me feel like, oh, I shouldn't have, I immediately go to the source. If I hurt somebody, hey, this happened. Did I hurt you? I'm so sorry. And that's the other thing, acknowledgement. If you feel you've done something to make you feel guilty, because sometimes it's not somebody trying to make you feel a certain way. Maybe you actually did do something where guilt is popping up. You still have to deal with you. You still have to deal with why did you do that? And to remedy that, first things first, forgive yourself. And then secondly, you know, ask the other person for forgiveness or forgive them, however that goes for you. But in terms of feeling guilty, I don't do that anymore. And again, to get to that point, you got to start at level one, which is that what? Self-love.
Love that. I love that. And as I already said, it all comes down to self love, and that is what you've been um telling us throughout. And that really changes everything. I totally understand that. It's the simplest initial step that you can take, and that is what would change or transform you the way you want. And the question that you ask yourself, that is so grounding, and it's doable, right? Anybody who just wants to take up a step, them asking themselves that, okay, do I want this? Yes, I want this. And then forgetting what others say, forgetting what other thoughts come from, and where do they come from. It's totally okay to do that there. So thank you for that. And to as we're coming to the end of it, in a world, where so many people, they feel lost, disconnected from themselves, and people who have come here to listen to you right now, and who are still stuck or they're feeling scared, what is that one grounding, human-sized step they can take today to begin their healing journey? And I know self-love comes with it, but yeah, what are other steps also do you suggest?
You know, you said the magic word, and that is fear. And what I've learned is everything that we ever want is on the other side of fear. So the step to take when it comes to fear and getting started is you got to break down fear. What am I afraid of and why? And I think once you start with those basic steps that aren't always easy because sometimes we don't even know why we're afraid, right? We just have this innate fear. But here comes that soul surgery. Why am I afraid? What makes me afraid and where did this even come from? And once you start that, because fear, right? Fear to self-love, that's before the self-love, right? Because you're operating at all this fear. But to break down that fear, and it may be multiple fears, because not all of us deal with just one thing, right? It could be a multitude of things. But break down your fears. Take the easiest one first. Hey, why am I afraid of this? Why is this stopping me from XYZ? Break down those fears, figure out why you're afraid, and start healing from right there. And that is the beginning of, I know, the self-love thing, but you got to break through that fear because everything you want is on the other side of fear.
That is so true. And again, it feels so doable. Thank you for that. Nikki, thank you for bringing such presence, depth, and clarity to this conversation. It feels like, the best reminder that healing, it isn't a spirit or it isn't a sprint, basically. It's a slow remembering. And to everybody who is listening, I hope this dialogue inspires you to return to your intuition, to honor your shadows, and to return to self love and realize that that is the best thing that you can do to yourself. And this is Healing Horizon. I am Pragya, reminding you that healing does not require perfection. If you want this, to work for you, self love is the thing. And this was Healing Horizons.